Okay, good afternoon, my beautiful people. I go by the name Shota de Olusegun. In this particular live session, I want us to review the Sabine Hossenfelder's video on Qualia research. So this video, I want to play the video so that we can.
Is your red the same as my red? You look at a red apple, I look at a red apple. We both wonder why we're looking at red apples, but we probably agree that the apple is red. Then again, how do we know our experiences are actually the same? For a long time, the answer was, we don't know and we won't ever know. Philosophers called it Qualia, and it was supposedly something that science can't test. But scientists just went and tested it. The idea that qualia are unmeasurable comes largely from the work of philosophers like Thomas Nagel and David Chalmers. In his famous essay, What is it like to be a bat? Nagel argued that there is something fundamentally inaccessible about another creature's subjective experience. Even if you knew everything about how a bat's brain works, you still wouldn't know what it's like to be a bat. That, according to Nagel, is the essence of qualia, the private subjective side of experience that can't be fully captured by physical descriptions. David Chalmers later expanded this idea with what he called the hard problem of consciousness, which is the idea that even if you understand all the physical processes in the brain, you still haven't explained why experience feels the way it does. This philosophical view made qualia seem almost mystical, cut off from scientific investigation. I've always thought this is bullshit. You can measure what's going on in the brain, therefore you can study what experience means in scientific terms. You cannot, of course, yourself experience the same as some other person or bat or carrot because you don't have the same brain. But give it some time and we can find the next closest approximation to someone else. Go. Scientists say that it might actually be possible to measure qualia, or at least compare them in a meaningful way. The authors of the new paper recruited 35 participants and showed them different colors while measuring their brain activity using fMRI. Their goal was to find out if the experience of specific colors like red or they compared the brain signals across participants and indeed found similarities that matched the perception of the same colors. This is the first time scientists have objectively measured qualia, subjective experiences, by identifying neural signatures that are the same for different people seeing the same color. In other words, they demonstrated that your red is, at least structurally and approximately, likely indeed the same as my red. This experiment is part of...
Okay. So now, based on this, so I want to talk on this particular video, and based on what she said, that your red might be, the same thing as my red. So that is like to tell us that subjective experience of being conscious is the same for everyone. But now when we look at what subjective experience is, subjective experience, we have it just for us to have that conscious. Now this subjective experience will have to take place by what is known as internalization mechanism. So I have a video on consciousness. I call it the science of consciousness. And that science of consciousness, the whole video is based on, you know, my research publication, like the research that I did. Then I use formula of everything to, you know, unify quantum mechanics to classical mechanics. And by applying that formula of everything, I was able to get what consciousness is. Now, when formula of everything is applied, the trajectory from the classical mechanics, or right from the trajectory from the classical level will be instant, because it is a trajectory of time. So now that trajectory being instant, it travels through the quantum level, the quantum mechanics beyond, to connect to the complex level. Now it is at that complex level that we have this profound connection to the missing piece of electron. And what I call missing piece of electron is the anti-particle of electron, which is positron. Now positron is connected to at higher dimension, and that higher dimension, the transition from the substrate dimension to higher dimension, is what is known as complex system. So now by connecting to this positron right there, we have this flipped mechanism such that the trajectory of that positron is now, you know, retracted or redirected into the substrate dimension for us to have energized, energized momentum, such as to have, you know, momentum into the black hole. So now this formula of everything is a very powerful formula, and it's a formula that feeds back on itself. And what that means is that you can use your input to generate an output, and then use that generated output as input to generate further output. So now by reiterating the application of formula of everything, we now, you know, get to the core singularity of black hole, where we are able to have this quasar-like signal right at the core of singularity of the black hole. So now I'm going to have a separate video where, though I already have video on that. So when you reiterate the formula of everything, now you can get that quasar-like signal effect. You understand? So basically, I'm still going to have some other videos where I will, you know, shed more light on that particular concept. So now what I want to really discuss here concerning the Qualia is that if we say that the subjective experience is the same for all or for everyone, how can that be? I want to give us an example. Let's say there are two boys, two friends. So let's say the parent of boy A is rich, and then the parent of boy B is not financially buoyant. So now, if boy B should go to boy, they are both served the same food. So let's say this person served boy A, you know, as always, you know, he has been eating that food, is more, you know, accustomed with the food. but boy B has never tasted, such nourished food before. So now, if they both enjoy the meal, if they both eat the food, can you tell me that their experience will be the same? If you are to quantify how boy B will actually, cherish the food or enjoy the food, you will know that the way he will enjoy that food will be far greater than the way boy A will enjoy the food. So now, even though they eat the same food, their experience of that food, of the way they enjoy the food, of how they perceive the food, of how the kind of sensation they have, by that eating experience of that same food will be different. That is one thing I want to point out. Now, for the fact that there is this conducted experiment where they are able to measure, there is this experiment and they are able to measure, the pattern formation in the brain, and by getting that pattern formation to be the same, for the fact that it is like that, that doesn't, justify the subjective experience of the participant. That doesn't justify the subjective experience of the participants. Now, the thing is this: consciousness from outside of the brain. Consciousness is external. Now, when we have the first phase of connecting to consciousness, that first phase is not the ideal phase, because after the first phase, there is another phase which is called the phase of internalization. And it's until when consciousness is being internalized that it becomes a personal experience. And when it becomes a personal experience, then it becomes part of you. It's something that you cannot that you cannot easily forget. So what do I mean by that? For instance, let's say we have two persons observing, phenomena in a street. So now, to person A, his own experience or his own perspective of that scene might just be focused on somebody that is actually, that is selling or hawking something on the street. Why person B might just focus his own experience on maybe on a music, on a particular music that is being played, or he might just focus his own experience on the vehicles that are passing by. So now, for the fact that they are both observing the same scene, that doesn't mean that they are going to have same personal experience, because subjective experience is a personal experience. Then there is something I just want us to understand about consciousness. Now, when consciousness is, dimension is a higher degree of freedom, because we are connecting to higher dimension. So dimension is a degree of freedom. But by having such relativity between the substrate dimension and higher dimension, then that dimension, we can say it's a higher degree of freedom and power. So dimension is all about degree of freedom and power. But now, having it to be higher relative to the substrate, then that gives you more room. So basically, what one gets connected to at that higher dimension is far more than what will eventually be internalized. It is more or less like the vision range. We know that humans' vision is being limited to visible, should I say visible spectrum of light. So there are some set of light that humans' eyes can see, and there are still some that humans' eyes cannot see. So we don't get the totality of information. So being conscious is even being limited to the dimension in which we operate. So if we're in 3D, our consciousness will be limited within 3D. The 4D consciousness is higher than that of the 3D, and that is why beings that are in that fourth dimension, that is why they will be more, versatile and more intelligent in the world. So our consciousness, I've said that in one of my videos that I uploaded, that even knowledge is being restricted by dimension. Consciousness is restricted, is limited by dimension. So even understanding is that. Let me now talk on that. They have something that is monitoring the brain activities, and the pattern they have is the same. So I answered the 3 hard questions of consciousness in that video, which is the science of consciousness. And there I said the mechanism of consciousness is the same for all. You understand? But the experience is different, because the experience will be subjective. And so now, basically, subjectivity is being attached to being biased. But in this case, we can only say that subjectivity is being biased by not getting the whole information, and that is being defined according to dimension in which that being who is to be conscious resides. You understand? So now, the only reason we might just say that subjective experience is biased is just not getting the full information from the external world. But now, the limited information that will now be your own reality. The reality we have is the reality of the dimension in which we operate. So we can only get advanced information by imagination and by our intuition. Once we get that, you can see that idea in this dimension, when you introduce it, it will be a strange idea. And it's until when you are able to prove it that people will now embrace. That is how it has always been. And that is why there is this, attack, usually from the mainstream scientists, whenever there is a novel discovery and novel knowledge. So we need to understand And another thing we need to know is that consciousness is a genuine virtue, and it's something that we need to understand quite all right for us to really know our real self. So now, experiment, for the fact that they were able to measure similar pattern based on what people are experiencing, that might not even, relate. In fact, it is not that it might not, it is not a relative, it is not relative to what, to what the participants, to what they are actually experiencing. So now, if we were to look at it this way, it might just be that what that machine is measuring is the mechanism, the conscious mechanism, which is going to be the same for all the people. You understand? It's going to be the same for all. You understand? Okay. So now, the thing is this: the mechanism of consciousness is to have that time trajectory which is instant, and then have this elongation by energy such that the time reading is synchronized to have global now. And by having global now, we can actually get connected to particle where it's supposed to be. Now, the major problem is that the particle that one wants to connect to, if if we are operating with speed, we can never get, we are not conscious, so we don't have the genuine information about the particle. And that is why entanglement is instant. Now, by application of formula of everything, I realized that entanglement is even beyond the constraint of quantum mechanics. So it extends, like it transcends into, the complex level. And that is why we could have that instant transmission of information by entanglement. Now, entanglement is telling us that instant transmission of information is highly important for us to track down particle at its exact position. And that is the mechanism that is being used by consciousness. Instant trajectory of time is what is used to connect to positron, which is the missing piece of electron. And then the feedback of that connection back to the classical object is the feeling of conscious experience that we have. So now, you can see that that mechanism is going to be the same for all. So the same mechanism is what will be used for me when I'm experiencing something and I'm conscious of that thing. And it is that same mechanism that will be used for another person too. So it might just be that the mechanism is what is being measured and not the exact experience. And I think I need to tell you that is exactly what is happening. So now, the Qualia experience, which is subjective experience, can never be the same for all or for everyone, if by that definition, indeed, that experience is subjective. Because being subjective is to be personal. And so, with the example that I gave, that the experience can never be the same. Though there might be some instances where there could be, a kind of coincidence that people might just be having same experience, you understand? But when we now look at let's now dissect the color. We know that, for instance, the red color that was used in that video, there is possibility for us to have the light portion of the red color and then have the deep portion of the color, because the spectrum of that color will be in form of gradient color, and then the transition of the light red color to deep red color will be smooth. So now, what if one person is actually focusing his own attention on light red color, and the other person is focusing his own attention on deep red color? In that case, would you have said that they are experiencing the same thing, even though it is still red color? They are not experiencing the same thing, because one is experiencing light red color while the other is experiencing deep red color. So experience, being subjective, will never be the same for all, even though they are experiencing the same deep color. Then that deep color to each of them is unique. So that is what I need to just clarify in this review of Sabine Hossenfelder. So people can just put down their own comment, whatever they feel about it, in the comment section. You understand? So, and then another thing I would like to say is that but basically I think that is enough. You understand? I don't want this session to be too big, but if you need to get more information about the science of consciousness, please connect to me on YouTube and then search for the science of consciousness to get that video and watch that video. You can see links to my research publication in the description below of that video. So my YouTube channel, you can connect to me at Shota De Olusegun altogether, at Shota De Olusegun altogether. And then my LinkedIn account, when you are on LinkedIn, you can just search for my name, Shota De Olusegun. Then you will get connected to my account, and there I post many things about my novel discoveries. So if you want to know how I use formula of everything to connect, or let me rather say to bridge the divergent gap between the quantum mechanics and classical mechanics, that video too is there on my YouTube. So get connected to me on YouTube at Shota De Olusegun altogether. Then on LinkedIn, just search for my name. My Instagram account, you can get connected to me at Shorix Noni. Then my TikTok, you can get connected to me on TikTok at Shorix Noni. You can get connected to me on X at Shotade, which is SOTADE A1, Shotadea 1 or Shotade A1. So SOTADE A1 on X. So thank you so much. I will be having a live session like this. Then I want more people to join this session so they can ask any question they want. So there is a novel discovery, and there is this particular powerful formula that I develop in my research publications. So I have 2 research publications, and when you get connected to me on YouTube, you can get links to those research publications, and then you too can explore and then test the validity of that formula. So now there is this formula that is capable of, bridging the gap, the divergent gap between quantum mechanics and classical mechanics. So thank you for this, for your time, and then let me know your opinion about this particular video. Thank you.